All right, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started on our third webinar here. You'll see that it says 2019 rules of golf, and as we've learned over the last couple weeks, 2019 was when we had all the major changes, so the rules we're still playing under are the 2019 rules of golf. We should have updated that main page, but I got some of these slides from the USGA. I want to cover a more expert level concept of the rules of golf today, status of the ball. And I hope that once we go through this, through some of these examples of status of ball and when a ball's in play and when a ball's not in play, it'll unlock more of the book to each of you. So once we have this concept down, we'll understand more about how the rules relate to one another. Really understand, why a player in a given situation is getting a penalty stroke versus a disqualification penalty, and go over certain areas throughout the rules that'll make more sense once we understand the concept of status of ball. Also, at the end of the presentation, I'll show you on the website where you can find the first webinar and the second webinar if you weren't able to join us over the last couple of weeks. So those are on video and they are linked on our website. So status of the ball and ball used in play, some of the things we're going to cover today. We're going to go over some of the definitions: in play, substitute, lost, and wrong ball, and then purpose statements, which you'll find all throughout the rules book. Some of these concepts we'll cover today: holing out with the same ball played from the teeing area, substitution of another ball while playing a hole. We'll talk about wrong ball and what a wrong ball is. When a player may play more than one ball at a time, there's a couple different scenarios where that can happen. When a player's ball in play after original ball was out of play, we'll cover some of these concepts and they'll make more sense as we get to a couple more slides from here. We're going to go over the 4 possible statuses a golf ball can have. That's in play, substituted, lost, and wrong ball. And like I said, in a couple slides, I'm hoping this will make a little more sense. How a ball gets into play, how a ball in play becomes not in play. We'll go over that. Substituting one ball for another between holes is always permitted. We'll cover that. We also know that under the new rules that we can substitute a ball anytime we take free relief or penalty relief. When substituting one ball for another during a hole is and is not permitted. So we'll talk about proper substitution and improper substitution, and when a player would get penalized. What to do if you substitute a ball during a hole when you are not allowed to, what makes a ball lost, what makes a ball a wrong ball, what to do if we play a wrong ball, because we'll learn that we can't score with that ball. And then, like I said, a couple circumstances where we may have 2 balls in play. Very rare circumstances where we may have 2 balls in play. So starting with rule 6, if we start with getting a ball in play in this purpose statement, a hole is played as a progression of strokes made from the teeing area to the putting green and into the hole. And you'll remember from the last couple weeks the 5 areas of the course that we covered. So the rules of golf would be pretty simple if we did this every time, right? We tee up from the teeing ground, played that original ball, that ball from the teeing area into the hole. We wouldn't really need a rules book. It would be that simple. But the problem is, right, we're humans, we make mistakes, we hit bad shots, we hit it into ponds and rivers and lakes, and we hook them out of bounds from time to time. So we have that book because sometimes things don't go our way. So after teeing off, the player is normally required to play the same ball until the hole is completed, and the player is going to get a penalty for making a stroke at a wrong ball or a substituted ball when substitution is not allowed. So, and this is where I hope to clear things up a little bit. So when we talk about status of the ball, we have 4 possible statuses a ball can have: in play, substituted, lost, and a wrong ball. The in play balls are in play and substituted. So let's talk about what substituted means. Let's imagine that we've hit our tee shot into a red penalty area. The rules of golf, understandably, aren't going to require us to jump in the lake and swim to the bottom of the pond to find our original ball to continue play of the hole. So this is an example where the rules will allow us to substitute. So when we take relief from the penalty area, we're going to substitute a new ball in play. And when we substitute, that's a proper substitution, and it allows us to continue play of the hole. I'll give you an example of a improper substitution, because this came up on a junior tour that I used to run in Kentucky. An improper substitution may be if you mark your ball on the putting green and were to put a different ball down for no reason to hole out from there. So that would be an improper substitution. I had a group of young ladies come to the scoring area after a junior event, and one of the competitors said, Marcia, I saw that on the 18th hole, it looked like you switched balls when you were putting. And of course, that started a conversation. And Marcia said, yeah, that's my putting ball. That's the ball I use to putt with. And of course, that raised some red flags for us. So we had to have a conversation with her. She had shot 72. She shot par. She was a really good player. And we went back through her round, and we realized that every green that she was on, from all 18 holes, she had a putting ball that she would put down. And her reasoning was she liked to keep the ball, a new ball to putt with, and it wasn't scuffed or scraped. And so she kept that in her back pocket to putt with. And of course, this is a great example of improper substitution. And the reason I bring this up is because even though she made this error 18 times throughout the round, she still had a ball in play, and she was still able to get a score because she had a ball in play. So this wouldn't be a situation where a player would be disqualified. Unfortunately, for this junior in this case, she's going to get a 2-stroke penalty for every infraction. So she actually got 36 strokes of penalty strokes. So she shot a 72. Her score at the end of the day was 108. And as you can imagine, she wasn't very happy. But this was a ruling that I actually took to the USGA because I didn't understand at the time. I didn't understand status of the ball. But if I had understood status of the ball, I would understand that Marcia in this instance improperly substituted, but she had a ball in play, so her score counted. So the other 4 possibilities for a status of a ball is lost and a wrong ball. And in those cases, you can't score with that ball, right? So if you play a wrong ball, you're going to get a penalty stroke for doing so. But more importantly, you can't score with a wrong ball. If it's not fixed, you're going to get a disqualification penalty. And we'll talk more about this as we go along. I'm going to give you some examples. So again, balls in play and balls that are substituted are in play, and that stroke counts with these balls. Balls that are not in play, lost balls and wrong balls, you cannot score with those balls. So when we substitute, this is telling us that when we substitute, a different ball replaces the original ball. And I've given you a couple examples so far. If we hit it into a penalty area and we're going to take relief, when we substitute, when we take relief from that penalty area and we drop, as soon as that ball comes out of our hand and we drop, that substituted ball becomes the ball in play. So the original is no longer in play. The substituted ball becomes the ball in play. The original in that instance, if we go back to this example of dropping outside of the penalty area, as soon as that ball comes out of our hand and we're taking relief and we're dropping with a new ball, the original that's in the pond becomes a wrong ball. It's not in play. So a wrong ball is any ball other than your ball in play. And that's one example. Another example would be any other golf ball on the course while you're playing. So an abandoned ball that you may come across on the golf course that you think is yours but isn't. If you were to play that ball, that would be an example of a wrong ball. And again, you cannot score with a wrong ball. What's another example of a wrong ball? So if we have a ball in play and that ball were to go out of bounds, it becomes a wrong ball, right? So we tee it up, we hook it out of bounds on the left-hand side of the hole. As soon as that ball goes out of bounds and comes to rest, that ball becomes a wrong ball. It's no longer in play, it's a wrong ball. If we were to play that ball, we're going to get a 2-stroke penalty in stroke play. And more importantly, again, you can't score with that ball, so we'd have to correct. So these are kind of some of the concepts that I wanted to go through and just play back and forth with different scenarios to show you how a ball becomes out of play after you have it in play. Another example would be a lost ball, right? So we know a lost ball and a wrong ball are both not in play. So after searching for more than 3 minutes, we can't find our ball. That ball becomes not in play. So even if we were, let's say we were searching in the weeds for our ball and it's 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and the ball has become lost, we may find that ball. So you could actually be looking at your ball that you hit from the tee, and it would still be considered lost because it's after 3 minutes, and we know that that ball is not in play. So definition of in play: a ball that is not in play is a wrong ball. As you see, I've gone over a couple examples of how a ball becomes a wrong ball. Another way a ball in play would become a wrong ball would be if you were to lift it for any reason. So if a ball in play is lifted, after it's been lifted and it's in your hand, that ball is no longer in play. It's out of play while it's in your hand. Once you replace that ball, now we put the ball back into play, right? As soon as we've replaced that ball, that wrong ball that was in our hand goes back into play and becomes a ball in play. And now we can, now the strokes will count with that ball and we can actually make a score on the hole. And again, James, we have James on the line to help with questions. I'm hoping that this was a little bit of an introductory to status of ball. We have a couple good graphics coming up in the next few pictures on the next slides that we can talk more in depth on these. But James, if you have any questions to start off with, let me know.
I just have one question asking for clarification on a different rule, Rule 14, and when a new ball can be substituted versus when the original ball must be played. But I think that might get covered later. Not exactly sure though.
Yeah, so I mean, a few examples of when you can substitute. You saw on the first slide, anytime you're in between the play of two holes, you're allowed to substitute and play a new ball. And under the new rules, to keep things easy, anytime you're taking free relief or you're taking penalty relief, you're allowed to substitute. And I think we're going to cover a couple examples of that in the next slide. Ball in play: the status of a player's ball when it lies on the course and is being used in the play of a hole. The ball first comes into play, so we need to think about when does the ball become in play for the first time. When we're on the tee, we're in the teeing area. A ball first becomes in play on a hole when the player makes a stroke at it from inside the teeing area. And this is a little note to say that there is an exception, because in match play you could actually tee off outside of the markers, but if your opponent doesn't recall the stroke, that ball's in play. But to keep things simple, when we make a stroke at it from the teeing area, that ball becomes the ball in play. And you've probably seen, I think the most recent one would be Zach Johnson at the Masters. He's taking a practice swing and he knocks the ball off the tee. And some people thought, you know, this is from a couple years ago, I think, but a couple people thought that may count, or you know, that should have counted as a stroke. But that ball is not in play until we have intent and we make a stroke at that ball from the teeing area. So while that ball is sitting on the tee, it's not in play yet. You have to make a stroke at it to become in play. That ball remains in play until it is holed. Except, we're going to go over 4 different ways. So if you understand that once you've teed up and you've put that ball into play and it stays in play until the ball is holed, that's the major concept. And then we have 4 exceptions of when a ball in play ceases being in play during a hole. We'll cover each of these. And this may be able to give us a better understanding of this concept. So the first way that a ball remains, the first way that a ball in play becomes no longer in play is when it is lifted from the course. So in this image on the right, you can see the caddy cleaning the ball. You know, and this may be a variety of different situations on the golf course where the player has lifted the ball and is taking relief from an immovable obstruction. Maybe his ball's on a cart path and his caddy's cleaning it up before he drops. When it's lifted from the course, the status of the ball goes from in play to out of play. So while the ball is lifted, the ball is no longer in play. And then this just gives us a footnote that tells us that on the putting green, we can mark, lift, and clean our balls. And if you want to make a note of that, that's 13.1b. 14.4, when a player's ball is back in play after the original ball was out of play. When a player's ball in play is lifted from the course or the ball is no longer in play. So again, this is just sticking with this first example. There's 4 ways that the ball can go from in play to out of play. And this first is when we lift it from the course. So once it's been lifted from the course, this ball that the caddy's holding now, which was the original ball when we lifted it, has become a wrong ball, which is an interesting thing because it goes from the ball in play to a ball no longer in play, and it's actually a wrong ball. The player has a ball in play again only when he or she replaces, drops, or places the original ball or another ball on the course with the intent for that ball to be in play. So keeping with the same example, we lifted the ball off the course. The caddy has it in his hand. We're only going to have that ball. That ball is only going to become in play again once the player replaces the original ball or another ball with the intent to put it back into play on that mark, right? So an example of this would be on the putting green. Maybe I've marked my ball, I've picked it up, I've flipped it to the caddy to clean it, and for whatever reason, the caddy has placed the ball down in a different spot on the green or maybe on the fringe, just to let it sit there. Just no intent of putting it into play, but just to let it rest there. We know that the ball's been lifted and it hasn't been put back into play, so that ball's a wrong ball. Even though it's our ball, the status of that ball is a wrong ball. So if I were to go play that ball, if I wasn't paying attention and I went and played that ball, I've actually played a wrong ball, which is a 2-stroke penalty in stroke play and loss of hole in match play. And we know from earlier that we can't score with that ball. So that's one of those situations where I have to correct, right? And if I don't correct, if I tee off on the next hole, I'm going to get disqualified. If it's the last hole and I do that, I'm going to get disqualified if I turn my scorecard in before correcting. So that's just an example of how you could play a wrong ball that was actually your ball, a minute before. So again, we've got 4 ways that the ball in play is no longer going to be the ball in play. So it becomes 4 ways for your ball in play to be taken out of play. And the second of these is lost. And this says even if it's at rest on the course. And our image on the right is a big group of people searching for a ball. So after 3 minutes, we know that ball is lost. So even if we find that ball at 3 minutes and 15 seconds, even though we see our ball that we hit from the tee, we know that ball is no longer in play because it's a lost ball. And if it's no longer in play, we know it's a wrong ball. So again, same sort of example, right? So you can see these guys searching for this ball. If we found it after 3 minutes and the player were to play that ball, they played a wrong ball. Even though it was their ball at 20 seconds earlier than that, it's a wrong ball now because it's lost. And if we were to play that ball, again, it's going to be a 2-stroke penalty in stroke play, loss of hole match play, and it has to be corrected because we know, more importantly than anything, that we can't score with that ball. So we're going to get disqualified if we don't fix this mistake. Number 3 comes to rest out of bounds. So the ball in play is no longer in play if it comes to rest out of bounds. That is our third option. Let's see if we've got a example of that. What to do when a ball is lost or out of bounds. If the ball is lost or out of bounds, the player must take stroke and distance relief. We should all be used to this, right? You add 1 stroke and you play the original ball or another ball from where the previous stroke was made. So if you hit it out of bounds from the teeing area, you go back to the teeing area. If you hit it out of bounds from the fairway, you go back to where you last played from. And as we covered in that first webinar, we know how to take relief in that instance, right? We go back to where we last played. We're going to get our reference point. We're going to measure our relief area. Remember those 2 key definitions, and we're going to drop in that relief area. And then finally, the last way a ball in play can turn into a ball that's no longer in play is when another ball has been substituted for it. And this is one of the examples that I gave earlier. This player is taking relief from the penalty area. They've knocked their ball in a pond here, and they're taking relief. So while that player is holding the ball, it's not in play just yet, right? We have to wait until he releases that ball. As soon as he releases it from his hand, that ball becomes the ball in play. And this says, this goes back to that more complicated understanding of substituted ball. even when it's not allowed by the rules. So if you go back to that example I gave about the junior, the poor girl that got 36 strokes and penalty strokes, she's not allowed to do that. But even if you're not allowed under the rule to substitute, that's just improper substitution. But that ball's still in play, and that ball can be counted for your score. So that's the real key concept that I hope at the end of all this that you understand. The difference in wrong ball and a substituted ball. If you can understand those two concepts, the rules of golf and a lot of the different situations that can occur on the golf course will make much more sense. And again, we've said this 5 or 6 times now. A ball that is not in play is a wrong ball. The player cannot have more than one ball in play at any time, and but there are times during a hole when a player has no ball in play. And again, these are examples where we have no ball in play, right? So we go back to the situation where the caddy's marked and the ball's in the caddy's, I'm sorry, the player's marked, but the caddy's holding the ball there. We haven't put it back into play. We have no ball in play. The second example is after 3 minutes, even if we find that ball, it's not in play. So we can be playing a hole and not have a ball in play. And then finally, this is an out of bounds ruling where this is the course. We've got a string pulled between the stakes. The whole golf ball is out of bounds, so we know the ball is out of bounds. In this case, the player does not have a ball in play. And then this is another area of the book that you may want to just star or dog ear so that you'll know to go back to. But 6.3D covers the limited cases when a player may play more than one ball at the same time on a hole. And you'll remember in stroke play, if we don't have an official nearby and you're unsure of what your relief options are, you're unsure how to proceed, we know the rules allow us to play a second ball and to score with both of those balls. And then we have to make sure that we talk to an official at scoring and let them know, what occurred. Because if you don't do that, you can get disqualified. But that would be an example of being able to play 2 balls when we're unsure how to proceed in stroke play. There's an option for that. And then another would be playing from a wrong place, which you'll see there in the second example. I'm not going to get into that, but that's another big concept under the rules of golf that you may want to tackle down the road, is understanding if we play from a wrong place and we have a serious breach, there may be an example where we'd have 2 balls in play. But I would say that 99% of the time, that statement, the player cannot have more than 1 ball in play at any time, 99% of the time, that's what you're going to find true. When the rules refer to a ball at rest or a ball in motion, this means a ball that is in play. And this is important, again, if you read that again, to understand that throughout the book, you're gonna see rulings that refer to ball at rest and ball in motion. And every time they refer to that throughout the book, they're referring to a ball in play. When a ball marker is in place to mark the spot of a ball in play, if the ball has not been lifted, the ball is still in play. So example down here on the bottom left, we're on the green, we put the quarter behind the ball. We should probably put it a little closer than the image shows, but if we put the quarter behind the ball is still in play if we haven't lifted the ball. Even though we put the mark down, the ball is still in play. We have to actually lift the ball to take it out of play. And then as we put it back into play, this is another interesting thing that you'll want to make note of. If the ball has been lifted and replaced, it's in play even if the ball marker has not been removed. So when we go back to replace the ball, we have intent to put it back into play, even if that marker is still behind the ball. Let's imagine we put it in front of the marker and then we go back behind the hole to maybe get a better angle to read the putt from. That ball is in play, and it's important to understand that concept because of all the things that could occur now that our ball is back into play. So I know that's a lot. I know that's a lot of material. But status of the ball, I really wanted to just make sure we had an introduction to substituted balls, incorrectly substituted balls, and more importantly, balls in play and wrong balls, right? So if we can understand that we score with a ball in play and we can't score with a wrong ball, we're well ahead of the curve and we'll have a much better understanding of the rules of golf. James, we're going to go on to the next topic here, but we'll answer questions over status of the ball before we do.
Don't have any right now. So if any roll in here, I'll try to answer them as they come in, and I think we can just keep moving forward on the next section.
Okay, perfect. Also, we'll hang around at the end of this presentation if there are any other questions. We'll take time at the end to answer any questions we've covered. So I'm going to switch presentations here. If you come to one of our in-person seminars, this is really one of the last things that we cover. I want to cover stroke and distance relief, provisional ball, and then go through all of the other major changes that took place in 2019 that we're still playing under. We won't go in depth into all the other major changes, but we'll make note of those so that you can find them in your book and you can spend a little more time with them if you'd like. So provisional ball. We should all be used to playing a provisional ball. You may play a provisional ball if your ball might be lost, out of bounds or lost anywhere other than a penalty area. So if it's out of bounds or lost anywhere other than a penalty area. We get this question a lot. Imagine if you're on the tee and you watch as your ball hooks into the pond and splashes in the middle of the pond. That would be a great example of a time where you cannot play a provisional ball. Okay. If you hit your ball up the left side and it's a very thick area, there is a penalty area up there, but you're not sure if the ball's in the penalty area or if it's in the weeds or anywhere else on the course. You have uncertainty. That would be a great example of when you could play a provisional ball. But if you're certain the ball's in the penalty area, you're not able to play a provisional ball. When you want to play a provisional, you must follow one requirement before making a stroke. You have to announce your intention to play a provisional. You must use the word provisional or otherwise clearly indicate that you are playing a provisional ball. And the reason we wanted to go over this is because this has changed a little bit. Before 2019, you had to say the word provisional. Now we'll see on this next slide, we have examples of things that we can say that will indicate a provisional ball. So you can say, I'm playing a provisional ball, which would be the one I would recommend. I think that's the clearest way to say it. If you're one of our rules nerds, you can say, I'm playing a ball under rule 18/3. That will indicate that you're playing a provisional ball. I'm going to play another just in case. So by saying just in case, you're letting the other players in your group understand that just in case that the ball is lost or out of bounds. So that's okay, and that's been a change. So you're able to say, I'm going to play another just in case. Examples of things that do not clearly indicate a provisional ball, I'm going to reload, I'm going to play another, or if you simply have no announcement, you just re-tee and play from there. So let's think about this for example. Let's say that I don't do a good job of indicating that I'm going to play a provisional ball. I just say, hey guys, I hit that poorly, I'm going to reload. And I re-tee a ball and I take a swing at that ball. Now, as soon as I've made a stroke at that ball, my original ball, as what we learned earlier, my original ball goes from in play to out of play. That ball is no longer in play. And that ball I just hit from the teeing area becomes in play. So let's imagine it lands in the fairway. I'm now laying 3, hitting 4, and that ball is in play. My original is no longer in play. So that's why this is so important. Okay, if I announce I'm going to play a provisional ball and I do it in the correct way, I'm still giving myself the opportunity that I can find my original. If I mess this part up, I take the ability away from being able to play that original ball. So procedure for playing a provisional ball. Let's say you find your original ball within 3 minutes. So same example, you hit one off the tee into the weeds, you clearly announced that you're going to play a provisional, you play that one down the fairway, you start your search and you find your provisional ball within 3 minutes. I'm sorry, you find your original ball within 3 minutes. The rules tell us that the provisional ball must be abandoned. So you now no longer have the option to play that provisional. You may play your original, and this says or proceed under the rules. It has to say that because simply we're not sure. Maybe that ball is on a cart path. Maybe it's lost in an immovable obstruction. There could be several different things that could happen. But most importantly, if you find your original ball within 3 minutes, you can no longer play your provisional in that instance. So it's important. And people usually ask the question, can I declare my ball lost? You know, maybe I don't want to go look for it. I want to play the ball from the fairway that I'm laying 3. You don't have to go look for it, but you do not have the ability to declare your ball lost. So if a spectator or a caddy or one of the players identified your ball, that would be tough luck. You'd have to go play the original or proceed under the rules with the original. So sometimes it's better not to search for your ball, is what I'm getting at. Sometimes it's better just to say, hey guys, don't go search for that. We're going to play on. I'm going to play the one in the fairway. Your original ball is found or known or virtually certain to be in a penalty area. So in this case, let's say we hit a shot. We didn't realize that the hole was marked red up the left side from the teeing area. We get up there to search, and we become certain through a variety of different ways that our ball is lost in the penalty area. So if we have knowledge or virtual certainty that it's in the penalty area, we have to abandon the provisional ball. We can't play the provisional ball. We have to either play the original or take relief from the penalty area in that case. So this is another concept that people get confused with when they're playing. You know, if we get up to that area and we realize, hey, the rough's only half an inch tall. There's no trees, there's no bushes for the ball to, ricocheted and bounced into. The only place for that ball to be is in the penalty area. We can't play our provisional in that case. We have to take relief from the penalty area. So that's mostly covers lost ball and provisionals. The next section is going to be just a quick overview of the other major changes that took place in 2019. James, you got anything?
Just had one come in. Question was, can a playing competitor find your original ball, and then you must play it?
Yeah, so in that instance, if your playing competitor were to find your ball and say, hey, Kelly, I found your title's 3, it's got a red dot, I know this is yours. You can't in that instance say, if I'm playing with you, James, I can't say, disregard that, James, I'm not coming over there, I want to play the provisional. You are mandated to go over and make sure that's your ball, and if it is your ball, you're going to have to play it or play under the rules from there. So the provisional would be out of the equation at that point.
All right, thanks.
All right, some other major changes, just to go over quickly, get the slides to work. If you accidentally cause your ball to move while fairly searching for it, this is a change that took place in 2019. Players used to get penalized for this. Now there's no longer. I'm going to show a video. I hope you guys can see it. So you probably couldn't hear the audio, but it was just showing that under the new rules, you can search for your ball. The player was actually sweeping their leg back and forth. We may not recommend doing it that way, but there's no penalty for that. You can search for your ball that way, and if you happen to move it, you just replace it, right? So you have to replace it. But if you happen to move it during search, you just replace it. And the video also talked about, well, what if I don't know exactly where to replace it? In that case, you would estimate the spot and place it in that spot. So that's even a change under the rules that make things so much easier. If you knew the spot, you got to replace it back to that spot. If you didn't know the spot and you caused your ball to move, you would just estimate it to the best of your ability and place it back on that spot. And another thing that they wanted to clarify here is obviously the ball wasn't on top of the grass, right? Or we wouldn't be searching for it the way this player searched for it. So you need to estimate the lie as well when you put that ball back. So this player had to actually push that ball, put that ball back under the grass when he was estimating that spot. So this is another change. If your ball accidentally strikes you or your equipment, there is no penalty. If this happens, play it from its new spot. And this one may sound silly, but under the old rule, if you were to, let's say you're in a bunker and you hit a shot and hit the lip and it ricocheted back and hit your leg, you were going to get a penalty stroke for that. Or if you were to hit a shot and it were to hit your golf bag, you were under the old rule, you would get a penalty for that. And the USGA and the R&A said, well, 10 times out of 10 when you do this, you've not played a good shot. You've not done what you wanted to do. So to penalize you in that position seems overkill. So they decided to roll this back. So you're going to play the ball from its new spot and there's no penalty. I'm not going to show this video. This goes back to one of our webinars from last week, just to understand that the caddy cannot stand behind the player when they're over the ball getting ready to hit a shot, right? And we talked about this a little bit. If the player resets and walks away from the ball and the caddy gets out of the way, there's not going to be a penalty. But you're going to have a penalty if the caddy's behind the player while they're playing a shot. So that's important to understand. Another change, caddies may always mark, lift, and clean the ball on the putting green. So the old rule, you used to have, caddies could do this, but the player would have to give authority to the player each and every time they wanted the caddy to mark the ball on the putting green. You had to give the caddy permission every time. And if you didn't give the caddy permission, you were going to get a penalty if the caddy were to mark and lift the ball. So now the rules say, and again, this is another simplification, that caddies can always do that. They can always mark, lift, and clean the ball on the putting green. Another big factor for the rules changes in 2019 that the USGA really wanted to highlight, promoting a faster pace of play. So there's a few things in the book that help us promote a faster pace of play so that we can all enjoy the game a little more. There's a new recommendation in the rules that you should make each stroke in 40 seconds or less. So that's actually in the rule book now. It didn't used to be in the book. You'll see that this is still a recommendation, but many golf associations and competitive events that you would play in, you're going to find that there are policies in place where you could get a penalty for that if you were to take more than 40 seconds. So while it's still just a strong recommendation in the book, when in practicality, when you're playing in events, especially with us or anyone else, you want to be mindful of that because you could get a penalty for pace of play there. Playing out of turn and stroke play to save time has also been encouraged. And we'll show a video in a couple slides about how ready golf is also being encouraged in match play, which is definitely a change. Max score, a new stroke play format allowing the committee to set a maximum score for a hole. So the committee can determine to set, you may want to set, double par. So if someone's on a par 4 and they get an 8, they can pick up and move along. And then of course the flag stick. So leaving the flag stick in the hole, was done mostly to help promote a faster pace of play. And we all should be used to playing with the flag stick in now. I'm going to skip this video, but I wanted to show the next one. So this is an example, because again, I don't think you can hear the audio. I can hear it on my computer, but this is an example of a match. So this young lady on the left side, she's away, and it's her turn to play. But we'll watch the video and talk about this a little more. So if you didn't hear the audio, this player, this young lady here is definitely away. They're playing a match. She's got a more difficult stroke, so she's taking a little bit of time to figure out what she wants to do. She asks her opponent if they'd like to play, if they'd like to go ahead and play. And the opponent there is allowed to say, yeah, I'll go ahead and play. So in match play, this is a big change. The thing that you want to remember is if you give your opponent the chance to play at a turn, you can't then turn around and let's say that person in the fairway hits a really good shot. You can't then turn around and recall the shot, right? That wouldn't be fair. So match play, we're still encouraging faster pace of play and encouraging ready golf. Again, this has been a change from 2019, where you've heard me say it a few times even today, that search time has been reduced to 3 minutes. So 3 minutes will be the maximum allowed. Remember that the 3-minute search starts when the player or the caddy or a member of their side get to the area where we're searching. They used to say, I think we've told this in some of our seminars, but Jack Nicklaus used to be aware of this back when it was a 5-minute rule, but same ruling. He used to tell his caddy to hang back. He didn't want his caddy up there searching before he got to the area where the ball was likely to be, because he wanted that whole 5 minutes to search for the ball. So it just shows you that he had a pretty good understanding of the rules of golf. Club damage. This is just one slide. Like I said, we're not going to get too in depth on this, but I just wanted everyone to know that damage for any reason during your round. You can either, if you have damage, if you damage your club for any reason during your round, you can continue play with it or repair it. And this is showing a guy in frustration. Even if you damage your club in frustration, you can continue playing with that club or repair it. You can only replace a club if you're not the one responsible for the damage. So if James and I were playing around a golf together and he drove his cart over my driver and broke my driver shaft, under the rules of golf, I have the ability to replace that club. If I do that, I don't have the ability to replace that club. So that's a major change. And clubs was, equipment and all the rulings surrounding equipment were a little more complicated before the rules changes. But this was the main one I wanted to highlight. And then finally, distance measuring devices are permitted unless prohibited by a local rule. This was just a switch from the default. So we now have in the book that distance measuring devices are allowed, but committees have the ability to go in and take a local rule and put a local rule into effect and say that they're not allowed. You're going to see distance measuring devices in pretty much everything. I think the only events that really don't have distance measuring devices are still the U.S. Opens, maybe the Senior Opens. Those events, still limit the ability to be able to use measuring devices, but we allow them in all of our events. And I think at the local level, when you're playing in club events, you're going to see that you'll be able to use distance measuring devices. So that really covers most of what I wanted to talk about today. I'm happy to stay on the line and answer questions. I wanted to say that we've covered in the last 3 weeks, and if you haven't been able to join us, I'll show you where you can go on the website to find the last 2 seminars, and we'll post this one once it loads up. But this is the main MSGA website under Learn Rules of Golf Resources. So that's Learn Rules of Golf Resources. If you scroll down under MSGA Resources, we're going to have all 3 webinars posted there. And we've really had the ability over the last 3 weeks to cover more material than you would get in a half-day workshop. So we went through all the material for a 3-day workshop, and then status of the ball I kind of threw in there just for the fun of it. I hope that some of that clicked. I know with status of the ball, I had to hear it at least 4 or 5 times to really get a good understanding of it. But if you go back and practice with status of the ball, I think you'll find that you'll understand the rules a little bit better. Also, before I let James take over and ask any questions, I wanted to show our Youth on Course program one more time. So you can find it a couple of different ways. I usually go under Join, click on Youth on Course. If you'd like to make a donation to our Youth on Course program, we greatly appreciate it. It's just such a great program. We've got so many kids that are going and playing at all the courses around the state. Once the courses are open back up, of course, to pay $5 to play a round of golf, and we subsidize the rest of that greens fee. So the course still makes the full amount of green fee on the juniors that play. And we're doing a lot of great things to raise money for that program because we want to see that grow. So if you'd like to support the MSGA, I think that's the best way to do that is to support Youth on Course and support our junior initiatives. But I'm going to open it up to James, see if we have any more questions.
I'll hang on here for a little bit, maybe a few more minutes. I don't have any questions yet, but I'll hang on for a little while here if any others come in. Did want to mention about that last slide that you showed with distance measuring devices, I know it's interesting sort of how common they are now, and I remember Mike Cumberpatch from Mid-Atlantic Golf Association a little while back put up maybe something on Facebook asking, are distance measuring devices sort of the future, and will we see hole location sheets kind of go away in the future? And my answer to that was just that, with a blind green or approach shot to a blind green, you can't always see, where you're hitting. And so sometimes you might not even be able to see the flag stick. So knowing how, many paces from the edge of the green or how far from the back or front the hole location is still pretty relevant information, I think, and something that I always want to have access to that information for tournaments and such. So I don't think we'll see hole location sheets go away, even with the advent of distance measuring devices really being included in the regular rules of golf. Well, a couple other questions that have come through. First one, just regarding subject I just described, what is the distance measurement device rule regarding slope, the feature of slope? And you can take that if you want, but the short answer is that it's not permitted.
Yeah, I should have included that. I was thinking of that when you were talking about hole locations. That the main change for 19. Before 19, you couldn't have a distance measuring device that even had the slope function available on it. They've relaxed that rule to allow you to turn the slope off. So, golf's a game of honesty. We're going to presume honesty. If you have a distance measuring device that has slope, just make sure that it's turned off while you play, and you'll be following the rules.
All right, and then one other question going back to status of the ball a little bit, and search time after the 3 minutes allowed during search, how the found ball or wrong ball is corrected. So this would really, have to be required, or it would have to be corrected under stroke and distance, because that ball, if it's been beyond 3 minutes, would be a lost ball, and therefore the wrong ball to score with.
Yeah, exactly. So if you hit that ball in the weeds like we talked about after 3 minutes, you miraculously find your ball. We know it's no longer in play, and if we play that ball, it's a 2-stroke penalty. And then, if we realize, oh my goodness, we have to fix this, we hope you realize that before you tee off on the next hole, because we don't want you to be disqualified. So in that case, you say, okay, what do I do now? I have to fix this. As James said, you have to proceed under stroke and distance, because that ball's lost. So you're going to get the 1 stroke for stroke and distance. You're going to have to go back to the tee. You're also going to get the 2 strokes for a wrong ball, and now we can get a ball back into play and hole out.
Then a couple other questions here that have come in. One's a little bit open-ended, I guess, but regarding club being damaged, a damaged club, if you hit your driver off a tee shot and the head comes off, what are your options? There's a sort of a bit of a complex answer, but if the head flies off, you're not able probably to continue using it, is my guess. But the rules don't say that you can't.
I think we can follow up on that one, because the equipment rule gets interesting. But if the head pops off and you're able to, they mostly have the screws and you have a tool, I think you're most likely allowed to pop that head back on. But you're not allowed to make adjustments. So if you had it set up to the draw bias, you're not able to put that head back on and turn it to the fade bias, for instance. But I'm almost 95% sure that you can pop that head back on. But we'll follow up with that answer and make sure that we have that correct and show where that is in the book.
Then another question that's just come through is in the situation where that you were describing earlier, where the competitor changed her ball on the putting green to use her quote unquote putting ball. Is that a penalty And the answer is yes. I think that was, you described that during the presentation, but yes, that is still a penalty.
Yes, that's a 2-stroke penalty. But you go ahead and hole out with that ball because, you know, that's an example of improper substitution. But remember that when we have an improper substitution, we still count the score with that ball. So we're going to go ahead and hole out and then add 2 strokes for playing an incorrectly substituted ball in that case. Yeah, and under that example, that the little girl got 2 strokes on every hole she played for doing that.
And that is, I think, all that I've had come through so far. I'm just typing a few answers up here, but that's all the questions.
I found the answer on repair, James. So you are allowed to tighten, for instance, you're allowed to tighten your driver back up throughout the round, but you can't change the adjustments like I talked about. So in that case with the driver, you would be able to, you know, tighten that back up, just don't change the adjustments. If your 5-iron head flew off, that would be a different situation. You're not going to be able to really fix that while you're on the golf course. You say you say that was pretty much it?
Yep. Yeah, that's all that I've got.
Okay. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for attending. Like I said, we'll get this posted up on the website. I think this will be our last one, just because things are going to get a little busier at our office. And like I said, you actually, if you complete all 3 of these webinars, you really get to go through all the material we cover in an in-person seminar. But I appreciate you allowing us the opportunity to, you know, to be our first to participate in this webinar. I've kind of learned as we go here. I really appreciate James's help throughout the process. And now that we know that we can do this, I think this is a great format for us to be able to do some education down the road. So thanks again, appreciate it, and thank you, James.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.